We are marking today 3 years of war in Europe, 3 years in which the entire security of Europe is now in question. And consider for a moment what has happened in that time. The number of lives lost. Russia, a supposed military superpower, blunted on the battlefield, forced to put down an uprising within its own ranks. Nearly 7 million refugees spilling into Europe. The major technological advances in drone warfare, which has pinned down the Russian Black Sea Fleet. And now, on this third anniversary, an American president who appears, on the face of it, to have switched sides, who now manipulates the truth about the war, reinvents the facts to mirror the talking points of the Kremlin. With us to discuss it all is our resident expert, the former targeting specialist and attack helicopter pilot Mikey Kay. And a reminder that he leads these briefings as he would brief his superiors in the military. Welcome.
Hi.
It's been quite the weekend.
Yeah, with a very busy week before it.
Do you think anything has changed in the negotiating strategies of the United States and Russia?
From the end of last week, no. I think we've had two very prominent diplomats that have spoken over the weekend, one from the US and one from Russia. Let's start with the Russian diplomat. He's the Deputy Foreign Minister, Sergei Rybakov. And what he basically has come out and said is that it is necessary to deal with the non-expansion of NATO. On this slide here, you can see his quote. And then we have Steve Witkoff, who's Trump's special envoy. He was on the American news TV shows over the weekend. And he was basically saying that there were all kinds, and I quote, there were all kinds of conversations back then about Ukraine joining NATO. That didn't need to happen, he said. It basically became a threat to the Russians. And so we have to deal with that fact. So basically, Witkov is effectively parroting the Kremlin's tune. However, Putin has actually been quite vocal pre the invasion in February 2022, of which you rightly say this is the third year of the timeline for that. So I think we should really go into what is the Russian mindset of all of this.
We've had a statement today from the Deputy Foreign Minister who says, actually, we don't want a quick negotiation, which Donald Trump is pushing for. So when it comes to that mindset, how are the Russians looking at it?
So there are two demand proposals that I think are really important for the West, for the viewers to understand what's in the mindset of Putin and Lavrov, the foreign secretary. The first one goes back to 2022, which were called the Istanbul Protocols, but effectively the Istanbul Demands. And that purely focuses on Russia's demands from Ukraine. If we can go to slide, please. So we've got some bullet points here. Effectively, it's the Ukraine's commitment to neutrality. That means no NATO. Now, that contravenes NATO's open door policy. So there's friction in itself. You've got Russian as an official language. That may not seem important to the West, but it's pretty much cited in every demand that Russia make. Armed forces to be capped at 85,000. That would absolutely leave Ukraine and the security of Europe vulnerable. A ban on foreign weapons and troops in Ukraine, as we know that, Starmer's already proposed putting troops in there. The Europeans are proposing some form of security force in there, so it would wipe that. And then finally, guarantors of Ukraine's neutrality, so UK, US, UK, China, France and Russia, effectively the permanent five guaranteeing that. So that's the demands on Ukraine from the protocol side, but obviously that doesn't mention NATO. Slide, please. On the second agreement, or the proposal, the demand, the next slide should show Article 4 and Article 6. This was a demand that was placed on the United States in December 2021 when Blinken, the then Secretary of State, and Lavrov met. And the two essences of that are Article 4, which is preventing any future expansion of deployments by NATO forces inside the NATO area. And then you have Article 6, which effectively says no one else can join NATO, which again...
And do you think that, because obviously Donald Trump's put an awful lot on the table already, that the Russians are now turning to this, to the Istanbul Protocol, as to how they view the future of NATO and where it is in Eastern Europe?
This is absolutely what the US are aligning with in terms of where they see a deal going. But none of these demands make any concessions from Putin. And the big one, obviously, is, slide please, we go to territories. This is what it's all about for Zelensky, is withdrawal of Russian occupation from those territories you can see in the southeastern region. You've got Kherson, you've got Donetsk, you've got Zaporizhzhia, and you've got Luhansk. Now, the one with the black border at the bottom is Crimea. So that's regarded as a post-24 piece of territory that will be off the table for Putin. The other four have been occupied since 2014. That's the bit that Zelensky wants to focus on. That's the bit that Europe are backing Zelensky on, but the US and Putin are completely ignoring that.
Let's talk about European backing, because there are two things ongoing simultaneously in New York today within the UN General Assembly. We've got a draft that the Europeans have sponsored on the floor of the General Assembly, quite separate draft, separate language that the Americans have put into the Security Council.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So the first draft that's going to go up is supported by the Europeans. It basically looks at what Zelensky's demands are. The UNGA will vote on that. And then the US proposal, which is more aligned with the Istanbul Demands, the protocol, will then follow at the General Assembly as well. But then you've got a third, which is the US taking that Istanbul Protocol to the Security Council, the 15 members. So you've got 5 permanent, 10 non-permanent, and the 5 permanent obviously being Russia, China, UK, France and the US. How that goes will be very important for the US, because if the permanent 5 vote on it, which is very rare in today's sort of geopolitical environment, when there's been a lot of paralysis at the permanent 5. So I think today, I mean, if that third meeting goes through on the Security Council, there's talk of it going to tomorrow, but the outcome of that, I think, will be a very good indicator as to what the appetite is from the GA.
Be interested to see how France vote on that, in mind of President Macron's visit to Washington today. We were focusing, before we came to you, on Friedrich Merz, who has talked there about what Germany needs to do, given the lack of support we're likely to see into the future on Europe. How difficult is it going to be for him to live up to the sort of things he set out today?
Well, I think you have to start with what the state of the German military is. Back in 2022, when Russia invaded in February, there was a realization from Germany that actually, you know, they've been accused of having an aging and shrinking military. So one of the consequences of the invasion was for Germany to basically come up with a $100 billion special fund to purchase modern weapons and effectively be able to forward project on the foreign policy. That's what defense spending is. It's to be able to back up foreign policy objectives. That in mind, that was in 2022. You know and I know that procurement of defense capability doesn't just take years, it takes decades. So the assessment at the moment is that yes, 47 billion has been spent by Germany from that fund on procurement, but obviously the procurement timelines and getting to what's called an interim operating capability of anything that they procure will take time, and it's in that work in progress stage. So they're by no means at a level which can give them those security guarantees that they're aiming to get, and that'll probably proceed and transpire over the next 5 years. You've obviously then got the government, which hasn't been formed yet. You've got Merz that's got to pick a partner, which is probably going to be the Social Democrats. They then have got to agree on foreign policy from that perspective, and then they've got this whole issue of the debt cap, 0.3%, which they're going to have to vote on, which will be required by 2/3 of the Bundestag to actually vote on that, to allow them to spend more, to get them into a position where not only Germany are confident of their own security capability, but Europe are confident in Germany leading any security initiative that might be put on the table.
Just a minute left, but the Taurus, which Olaf Scholz never wanted to give to Ukraine, might they send some of the longer range missiles to Ukraine?
Yeah, I mean, it's on the table, and, you know, we've got the nuclear policy as well. So, you know, for years, Macron has been approaching Germany to say, look, you know, you guys don't have nuclear weapons. We know that you have US nuclear weapons on your territory, but what about having more of a European deterrent rather than having to rely on the US? If we go slide, please, I'll just show you the nuclear arsenal that we've got. And that effectively shows that, you know, Russia has the majority. You can see Russia at the top there. America has over 3,500. You take that out of the equation, you've then just got France and the UK that have nuclear weapons that are upfront and able to be able to provide some form of nuclear guarantee. The UK obviously has the Trident deterrent, which are the submarines, which are basically anywhere in the open seas in undisclosed locations. So that's a deterrent aspect. But I do think that Germany will be way more amenable now to that proposal by Macron, and we'll see that play out in the coming weeks.
Really fascinating detail, Mikey Kate. Thank you very much for that.